The words hung in the air like shattered glass, each syllable cutting deeper than the last. I'm not their father, Sarah. I stood frozen in our kitchen doorway, my hand still gripping the ceramic mug that had been warm moments before. Now everything felt cold. The coffee, my fingers, the space between David and me that had somehow become an ocean in the span of 3 words. Our twins, Emma and Ethan, were upstairs sleeping peacefully, unaware that their entire world was being questioned in hushed tones below. At 18 months old, they were perfect mirrors of chaos and joy, with Emma's stubborn chin that reminded everyone of my mother, and Ethan's infectious laugh that could fill any room with light. What did you say? The question escaped as barely a whisper, though I'd heard him perfectly. Sometimes we ask people to repeat the words that destroy us, hoping that somehow the second telling might soften the blow. David sat slumped at our kitchen table, his usually pristine work shirt wrinkled, tie loosened around his neck like a noose he was trying to escape. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his normally confident posture had collapsed into something I didn't recognize. This wasn't the man who had held my hand through 36 hours of labor, who had cried when the doctor placed our babies in his arms, who had spent countless nights walking the hallways with colicky infants. I got the results today, he said, not meeting my eyes. The paternity test. I had to know, Sarah. I had to be sure. The mug slipped from my fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor we'd refinished together last spring when we thought our biggest problem was choosing the right shade of oak stain. Coffee splattered across my bare feet, hot and bitter, but I barely felt it. You had what? My voice found its strength, rising with each word. You took a paternity test? When? How could you? Without telling me. 2 weeks ago. I've been carrying this around, trying to figure out how to. He gestured vaguely at the space between us, as if the devastation he'd just unleashed could be contained by hand movements. How to what, David? How to accuse me of lying? How to question whether our children are yours? The betrayal hit me in waves, each one stronger than the last. Do you have any idea what you're saying to me right now? He finally looked up, and I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before, doubt. Not just about the twins' paternity, but about me, about us, about everything we'd built together over 7 years of marriage. Sarah, please. I know how this sounds, but I needed to be certain. There were things that didn't add up. The timing, some conversations you had with Marcus last year. Marcus, my ex-boyfriend from college, who had briefly re-entered our lives when he moved back to town for work. We'd had coffee twice, innocent catch-ups that I'd mentioned to David because I believed in transparency. Now that openness felt like evidence in some trial I didn't know I was part of. Get out. The words surprised me with their steadiness. Sarah, we need to talk about this. Get out. I pointed toward the front door, my hand shaking but my voice iron. Now, as David gathered his keys and jacket, I noticed the manila envelope on the table, official-looking papers spilling from its edges. Whatever was in there had convinced my husband that our children weren't his. But I knew the truth, and I was going to prove it. The house felt impossibly quiet after David's car pulled out of the driveway. I stood in the kitchen surrounded by coffee-stained chaos, my bare feet still sticky from the shattered mug, but all I could focus on was that manila envelope. My hands trembled as I reached for it, half expecting it to burn my fingers. The letterhead read, Gene Tech Laboratories in sterile blue font, and below it, David's name listed as the requesting party. The betrayal cut fresh. He'd gone behind my back, stolen samples from our children, and built a case against me in secret. I spread the papers across the table, scanning through technical jargon and probability percentages until I found the conclusion that had destroyed my marriage. Probability of paternity, 0%. The number stared back at me, black ink on white paper, seemingly absolute. But something nagged at me, a detail that felt wrong. I read the document again, more carefully this time, noting sample collection dates, reference numbers, and my breath caught. The samples were labeled Subject A and Subject B, but when I cross-referenced them with the collection dates, something was off. The dates listed were from 3 weeks ago, when David had taken the twins to his mother's house for the afternoon. I remembered because it was the first time I'd had 4 uninterrupted hours to myself in months. But there was another date on the document, an earlier sample collection from 2 months ago, labeled differently. This one showed a different reference number, and was listed under David's medical records, not the twins. I grabbed my laptop from the counter, my journalism background kicking in as I began to research gene tech laboratories. What I found made my stomach drop. 3 class action lawsuits in the past 2 years for sample mix-ups and contaminated results. A Better Business Bureau rating of D-. Reviews from customers complaining about switched samples and inaccurate reporting. The sound of tiny feet pattering overhead reminded me that Emma and Ethan were stirring from their nap. I quickly photographed every page of the document with my phone, then climbed the stairs to their nursery. "Mama." Emma's cherubic face beamed at me from behind the crib rails, her dark curls, so like David's, framing her bright blue eyes. Ethan sat quietly in his crib, methodically throwing his stuffed animals onto the floor with the same focused precision David used when organizing his tools. Looking at them, I saw David everywhere. Emma had his stubborn cowlick that refused to lie flat. Ethan had inherited David's habit of tilting his head when he was thinking. These weren't coincidences or wishful thinking. These were genetic markers as clear as fingerprints. I lifted them both, one on each hip, breathing in their familiar scent of baby shampoo and innocence. "Your daddy is confused right now," I whispered into Emma's soft hair. "But Mama's going to fix this." Back downstairs, I noticed something I'd missed earlier. Beneath the paternity test results was another document, partially hidden. I shifted Emma to one arm and pulled it free with my other hand. It was a medical report from David's doctor, dated 6 months ago. The header read, "Fertility Consultation Follow-Up," and the content made my blood run cold. Phrases jumped out at me. Previous vasectomy reversal, unsuccessful procedure, sterility confirmed, recommend alternative family planning options. The papers slipped from my fingers as the truth crashed over me like a tsunami. David couldn't father children. He'd known this for months, maybe longer, which meant he'd known the twins couldn't be his from the moment I told him I was pregnant. So why was he confronting me now? And what else was he hiding? I didn't have to wait long for answers. David's key turned in the lock just as I was putting the twins down for the night. He moved through the house like a ghost, shoulders hunched with the weight of secrets finally demanding to be told. "You read it all, didn't you?" He stood in the kitchen doorway, looking at the scattered papers I'd left deliberately visible on the table. "The fertility report." I crossed my arms, armor against whatever was coming next. "You mean the one that says you've been sterile for 6 months? That report." His face crumpled, and for a moment he looked like the broken man I'd glimpsed earlier. But now I understood the source of his pain wasn't betrayal, it was shame. "Sarah, I can explain." "Then explain." I sat down across from him. The same table where we'd shared thousands of meals, planned our future, discussed baby names. "Explain why you let me believe you thought I cheated. Explain why you put me through hell when you knew the truth all along." David's hands shook as he reached for the medical report. "The vasectomy reversal, it was supposed to work. When we decided to try for kids, I had the procedure done, but I didn't tell you about the original vasectomy. I was 22, stupid, thought I never wanted children." His voice cracked. "By the time we met, I'd already changed my mind, but I was terrified you'd leave if you knew." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "You had a vasectomy?" "When we were trying to conceive, when I was tracking ovulation and taking supplements and blaming myself for the months that passed. I kept thinking it would work. The doctors said there was a chance. But when you got pregnant, I knew it was a miracle or—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Or I'd been unfaithful." The words tasted bitter. "So you ordered a paternity test." "I ordered it to prove they were mine," he said desperately. "I thought maybe the reversal had worked, that somehow. But when the results came back negative, I panicked. Instead of telling you the truth about my medical history, I accused you of the one thing I was terrified of myself." I stared at him, processing the layers of deception and self-destruction. "David, that lab has multiple lawsuits for mixed-up samples. The test is probably wrong." "I know." His admission was barely audible. "I researched them after I got the results. I even called today, and they admitted there might have been contamination in the batch that included my test." "Then why?" "Because I'm a coward." Tears streamed down his face. "I've been lying to you for 7 years about something fundamental. I've been terrified every day that you'd find out and realize you married someone who deceived you from the beginning. When that test came back negative, it felt like proof that I didn't deserve them, didn't deserve you. I looked at this man I'd loved for 7 years, seeing him clearly for the first time. Flawed, frightened, human. The David who had stayed up all night with sick babies not because he was biologically compelled, but because he chose to love them. The father who had built cribs with shaking hands and sung lullabies off-key, not from instinct, but from devotion. David. My voice was gentler now. DNA doesn't make you their father. Love does. Choice does. Showing up every day does. He looked up at me with hope and terror warring in his eyes. But the lying stops now, I continued. All of it. We're going to get a proper paternity test from a reputable lab, not because I need proof, but because you do. And we're going to counseling, because this marriage can't survive on secrets. And if the test confirms what I already know, that they're not biologically mine, I reached across the table and took his hand. Then we'll deal with that together. But David, those children upstairs, they're yours in every way that matters. Biology is just science. Family is choice. For the first time in weeks, David's smile reached his eyes. I choose you, he whispered. I choose them. I choose us. From upstairs came the sound of Emma's sleepy laughter and Ethan's babbling response. Our children, creating their own perfect symphony of belonging. In the end, that was the only test that mattered. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel and enjoy these other amazing stories.